My name is Joe Wooden from Tory Consulting. Welcome to our blog series on all things design. Today I'm joined by Jason Ross, co-founder of Time Under Tension, who are helping companies embrace generative AI. Jason, it's a pleasure to speak to you today. Thanks for joining us.
An absolute pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
My pleasure. Now, you haven't always worked in the field of AI. Can you tell us a bit about your journey and what drew you to the intersection of design and AI?
Yeah, sure. I'm never sure how far back to go, Joe, when people ask that question. Should I go into the first foray of digital, which was me doing voiceover, being a voiceover artist for video games? Not sure that's too relevant. I started very early on in the digital design space. I got one of the first masters in design for interactive media back in the days of the first versions of HTML, and really been involved in design since then. Where that led to quite naturally was sort of the internet, building of websites, building of apps. And then I ended up working agency side, running agencies, coming over to Australia to run one of the digital agencies here, Reactive.
Yeah.
Became part of the big consulting groups, Accenture, and then ran Frog Design for a year or so. And then I guess around a year ago, saw generative AI spring onto the landscape and kind of felt a lot similar to the early stages of the internet, where there were a whole bunch of new experiences to be explored and created. And we felt that sort of early pioneering creative spirit is what's needed to help bring some of those use cases to life. So together with two partners, we co-founded Time Under Tension.
Very cool. Yes, I was reading a blog yesterday, I think, and it was all about the intersection of the dot-com boom and how that's sort of representative in design and AI now. And if, I guess, design aren't on the front foot, they kind of get left behind like they did in that era as well. So interesting time. Like, it's hard to sort of predict what's about to happen, but very exciting. So starting a business in it, how do you get started in an unknown sort of space?
And I guess that's where the similarity of the early days of the internet started. No one, including those that worked in the space, really had all of the answers. It was more a case of, do you have the right attitude, the right time to invest in finding what those answers are? I mean, just last night, OpenAI revealed a whole tranche of, pretty incredible new features to ChatGPT. So who's going to take the time to sit down and really understand what being able to launch GPTs means, whether it's for us personally or in a business context? So I think that curiosity, Joe, is probably the main thing. I don't mind admitting for myself that in the last 5 years, 10 years, things have felt very flat from an innovation standpoint. If you talk about design and UX, the whole process of doing UX became very standardized. You do your wireframes, your personas, and you sort of go through the process. And it didn't feel like that design process really had much open for innovation. So I think that what generative AI has done is reinvigorated a lot of the curious folk out there.
I'm definitely one of those curious folk, and it is a bit of a rabbit hole. Like, you can really get stuck into researching what tools you can use and how you're going to use them. But I think that's probably leads on to the next question. Like, a lot are in this sort of realm of experimentation at the moment. In your perspective, what aspects of AI are still in the experimental stages in comparison to what we can actually start implementing? And I think it's one of the big iffy factors at the moment with designers using AI, or large corporates adopting AI in design.
Yeah, there's probably a few different ways to answer that. I'll come at it from the clients that we're working with, from their lens, I guess, because what we're seeing. So we've been doing what we're doing, which is, as you said earlier, it's helping clients identify the use cases and then execute those use cases in their business. We've been doing it since the first versions of ChatGPT, so for over 9 months now. And I'd say that there are some areas which are really tried and tested, and where clients are either coming to us and saying, we know this is where we want to apply generative AI. So, for example, we're seeing a lot of marketing divisions and marketing folk embrace some of the real low-hanging benefits that generative AI can bring for them. So you talk about things like, copywriting, or using ChatGPT as part of the brainstorming and the design process, even going as far as to supporting like mood boards and generation of images to speed up that whole process. So we're seeing a whole bunch of not just use cases, we're seeing clients in the marketing space want to teach their teams the tools and actually make them part of their workflows. And that's that's sort of happening right now, and we're very busy. That call those low-hanging fruits. The areas where it's more a lot more experimentation is needed is when you start moving into, I guess, touch points operating independently. So customer, there's been a couple of article write-ups about, can we replace the drive-through touch interface with AI voice interface? And I think it's when you start looking at things fully autonomous AI, or how do GPs leverage it? How could we deal with more patients if we had triaging happening by AI? So it's when you start moving into areas which are either heavily regulated or there are strong concerns around ethics. It's questions of trust. How much would a person trust a machine? Those are some of those require a lot of sort of sandboxing, experimenting, and it's probably a matter of time as well for us just to get used to trusting machines, in the way that we're now able to.
Definitely. I've been playing with it a lot, and a lot of the stuff that I found to be most useful at this point is more of that content creation. Either, I don't know, to implement a chatbot or start working with autonomous AI, I feel like it's still relatively early on there. So I don't know if that's me or it's just still not quite polished around the edges.
I don't have much hair left, but I was talking to the hairdresser today. They were asking me if their job's at risk. I said, no, they're probably the last jobs to be at risk. And the ones that we didn't think that would be at risk, the professional services, the medical space, lawyers, it's not a question of risk. That's where there are a lot of use cases for leveraging AI. So indeed, anywhere where plain English, or plain language rather, plays a strong role in that line of work, those are definitely areas that are ripe for disruption for generative AI.
It's a good point. And I think the sentiment in the design space is that AI is not necessarily going to replace designers, but people that adopt AI at an early stage will probably be a little bit better off, well, a lot better off as things progress. So what would be your opinion on that? And I guess utilizing it early.
Yeah, it's funny. We've got, I think in some of our sessions, in pretty much all the informed sessions that we run, we have that saying, which is the now well-used saying around AI won't replace humans, but humans using AI will replace those that don't. I think the sentiment around that is that I wouldn't be using sort of future tense for that. These are things that are happening right now. So it's right now AI is being used by organizations that don't use it. Their staff are still using AI. So it's almost it's an inevitable outcome of having the tech that's so accessible. So I definitely agree with that sentiment. I think probably there is a sense of speed that I would add to that saying. I do think that in many of especially in the design space, the role of a designer to leverage and use AI, there's huge potential and huge opportunity there. It's not necessarily rewriting the entire rule book yet. We're not at the place where you sort of give ChatGPT a brief and come back 24 hours later and it's built you whatever you've asked it to build. But it's definitely at the place now that working alongside you as a designer, as a copywriter, whatever role that you have in that sort of design space, there are huge benefits to unlock from it.
With that, it's a very good point that even with a lot of corporate organizations, they're relatively apprehensive towards AI, sort of the risks associated with it before they understand it properly. But staff are already using it. Like there's been some examples of companies kind of shutting down certain tools and not allowing their staff to use it. Like, what are the sort of conversations that you're having with the organizations that you work with around how they can use it and how to mitigate risk when allowing their staff to use ChatGPT to brainstorm or any of the other tools?
Yeah, I mean, some of the sessions that we run with our clients, when we get asked to speak to the broader teams over there or the broader staff base, we'll always start with a little bit of a show of hands, who's using personally, who's using at work. And without fail, over 80% of people have used ChatGPT in some form or another. And then when you sort of ask about how much you're using it in the workspace, then there'll be a much lower show of hands. Now, I don't think we necessarily believe that those people are not using it in their day-to-day jobs. Almost everyone that you probably speak to in your sphere is using it in one way or another. I think there are, there's a few things that we usually go in top down. So we'll be talking to either CEO level or heads of division level. And we'll talk about adopting for the top-down approach. So really embracing generative AI and guiding your teams through the process. So saying we're not necessarily shying away from it, but this is how we plan on adopting it. We're seeing that companies that are doing that, their staff are responding really well. Sort of instead of being like, we're scared of AI taking our jobs, it's moving into the territory of it's more like a skills booster, or it's sort of helping them add something on their CVs that they never had, a new way of working, a new way of thinking, a new way of doing what they do. So top down, we say embrace. The other thing I'd say is AI is not new. AI, I think we've all known about its existence, especially in the design space, from a personalization standpoint, from a content delivery standpoint. AI has been around for a while. And there are heaps of frameworks around ethical and responsible implementation of AI, which have largely been ignored because there's not been such broad use cases for using AI. But they're great. I mean, the Australian government's got a fantastic set of principles which cover everything from fairness, contestability, accountability. These are sorts of things when you start putting a generative AI lens on all of those, say, well, it makes a lot of sense. Anytime I produce something with generative AI, it makes a lot of sense that I should let my customer or my user know that this piece of content has been AI generated. And when I make that piece of content, there are things I need to be aware of. There are inherent issues in these models. They are biased and they do produce hallucinations. So being aware of those issues can help me work with it. It's definitely not a reason to avoid it. It's more a reason to learn and understand what those issues are. So organizations that are sort of jumping straight in, I'd say they're going to be light years ahead, and they'll have a lot less issues like the ones that you mentioned, the Samsungs of this world, leaking of stuff that have been pasted into ChatGPT. Also, from a tech standpoint, things have moved very quickly. So Microsoft now offering private instances of open AI Azure servers, so you can run Bing Chat within your organization or ChatGPT within your organization completely securely without worry of information that's being put in there going out. And you still have issues of bias and stuff like that, but at least from a security and privacy standpoint, your organization's safe.
So when you're let's go into an organization as a new client, is that part of the main, I guess, portion of what you do is stakeholder management in terms of taking them through the risks and liabilities and how secure it can be if you set it up properly at the start?
When the three of us that founded Time Under Tension started it up, we said what we don't want to become is a consultancy. So we try to avoid everyone's in this space together. So that's where the role of designers comes in. We need to sort of design think our way through how an organization adopts AI, and the use cases are different in every organization. We set up Time Under Tension because we wanted to build things, and this is what we try and spend most of our time and efforts doing. It's finding those use cases and then building proofs of concept. Now, in some cases, can be a matter of days. They're very quick turnaround, no code sometimes type of proofs of concept. So to get to a place where we're building, in order to do that, yes, we find that we sort of have to answer some of the hairy questions up front. So a CEO will want to know, what about copyright infringements? If you're about to come in and train my team, these are things that I need to be aware of. So yes, we are getting drawn into sort of a lot of what we call informed sessions. And that sort of ranges from board level, CEO level down to the team. But where we want to spend most of our time is actually on the building side. There's just so much, every day there seems to be a new tool, a new announcement, which opens up a whole bunch of new use cases. And that's where we set up Time Intentional, as we wanted to play in that space.
Very cool. So how do you keep on top of everything new that comes out? It's evolving at the light speed. So there's a new app every 3 minutes. How are you staying on top of all the right tools that you can start to work with and start to tinker with and implement?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, first of all, there's a lot of late hours. I'd say that we're probably in the lucky position that this is our jobs, and we've chosen to sort of focus specifically on generative AI. So a lot of our research is also client work. I think I would probably, it'd be a lot harder if I was doing a day job, if I was working in an organization and my job was to look after change management, or my job was to look after the design team and UX. If you've got day-to-day products that you're looking after, you don't have that time. So I think we're in the fortunate position that we have that time. But there's lots of open and free training that's out there from Microsoft, from OpenAI. You don't need to go on expensive courses to learn these things. And there are some great introductory courses from Google. In the early days, we sort of all went through and did some of that. There's a lot of reading to be done. I think on the learning side, there's a whole pile of things that can be done. But I do want to bring it back to the creativity component, because once you read all of that and once you understand, you quickly realize that where the barrier is, it's the creative thinking about what all of this tech is enabling. So, it's great to learn HTML code, but what can you actually do once you've learned HTML code? What are the sites that you'll build? What are the experiences you'll create? And now if we look at a lot of the touch points that have been created over the last 20 years, I like the Amazon example, the Amazon homepage, it's the best that things can be, but it's also a mess. It's got, links all over the page and banners, but we've come to accept that that's the only way to navigate, the tens of thousands of SKUs that exist there. But now with generative AI, there's a whole new way that we could and should be looking at delivering an experience that cuts through tens of thousands of SKUs. So I think you can do as much learning as you need, but I do think there needs to be an equal focus on how do you be creative with it. You can learn ChatGPT, but how do you use it in your day-to-day job? How do you prompt it in the right way to get the right outcomes from it? Do I ask it for an answer, or do I ask it for the questions that I need to ask myself in order to get to an answer? So these are the things that I think are equally as important as the sort of hands-on learning side of things.
And I guess that leads on to sort of, people becoming AI human experts within organizations. What role do you think that's going to play in the future design or delivery of new products?
I think there's probably two dimensions. So one is, I like using examples. Let's talk about the delivery of medical advice, GPs, practitioners. Let's talk about that. Intrinsically complex. I mean, you need to be, in order to change the way that happens, you need to really be quite an expert in the healthcare space. You can't sort of just wake up one day, read a couple of books, and then say, okay, this is how we're going to change healthcare delivery. So I'd say one sort of facet is the deep dive into the knowledge space of a particular industry or a particular area. It's going to be super important when we talk about being creative with the new ways of delivering a product or a service. Being a subject matter expert in that space is going to be pretty key. And I think, when I talk about we've been lazy, a little bit lazy at times, sometimes we don't apply subject matter experts to things that require a subject matter expert to solve. So that's one dimension. The other dimension sort of cuts across all the different industries. And you say, well, if we look at something like knowledge sharing is something which we're doing a lot of work transforming the way knowledge sharing works. So, a simple example is lots of organizations sit on piles and piles of documentation in their organizations, and they want new ways of being able to write proposals, find information, converse with the information, have ChatGPT use that information to solve problems that they have today. So there are use cases like that sort of cut across many different industry types. So then I think we'll start seeing different types of focus areas, whether it's around conversational commerce or whether it's around knowledge finding. So we'll sort of see those new age use cases spearheading through whether it's new products or experts that really understand how to build those tools. It's something that we've been doing, for instance, is building these things. Don't work as, you look at the videos from Microsoft where you click a button and you create a proposal and it's just magically there. Things just don't work that straightforwardly. You've still got to do some fine tuning and some training and make sure that the information that you give it directly correlates to the quality of the information that you get out of it. So there's still effort to be done to get it to do the things you need it to do. So there's the expertise in those sort of experience domains, I'd say.
It is exciting to sort of try and get it to that working state. Look, we've got a few AI tools that we're playing with. We've had a data wrangler come into the business and kind of help us understand what we can and can't do. And just getting it to that point where you can actually use it and it's functional based on your company, it's a lot of fun. It speeds up things a lot. But is there anything that you're currently playing with that you're excited about, or I guess just gets you really interested in going to work and implementing what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're always doing R&D, and there's actually a fair amount of that we publish through our LinkedIn and on our website. So we're always using for instance, ChatGPT just came out with vision through the API. So its ability to be able to see the world around it and analyze. So you can upload a photo at a basic level, upload a photo and have it analyze that. But at a more advanced level, to actually build an application where ChatGPT can see the world around you and provide you with real-time feedback about what's going on there. So we're constantly playing with those new frameworks so that we can go and advise clients on how easy or difficult is it to use those. In the early days, we did a ChatGPT enabled version of I Spy, and that's something that's been evolving as ChatGPT sort of introduces voice, as it introduces vision. It's becoming a lot smarter version of itself. So there's R&D, a lot of R&D that we're doing. And then on the client side of things, our sort of very simple methodology of inform, design, and create on behalf of our clients, sort of wrap that up into what we're calling an AI design sprint 0. And that's sort of an amalgamation of the very best of everything that we do by way of education content, helping clients find their use cases, and then building those rapid proof of concepts. So we've launched this proposition called AI Design Sprint 0, which is something that's getting a lot of traction. And we're now working with a bunch of educational partners to help scale that component up, because we're still a small team, but there's a lot of value in the type of content that's there. So really scaling up that part of the business. And I think there's not a day that we don't wake up when we're sharing the news of the night and sort of figuring out whether that's something that we need to have a point of view on or put into the R&D pipeline. So yeah, there's always something to be doing. How
do you divvy up your time between implementation and R&D? Because there's just so much to get your head around.
Yeah, there is. Well, it helps. We've started to hire some developers now. So we're, some of the early thinking that we did into which tech stacks do we work with, AWS, Google, Microsoft. So we're lucky now we've got a small team that we're able to broaden the effort around R&D on. So yeah, that side of things is definitely growing.
It sounds like you've found a pretty sweet spot in the market now that no one's really focusing on at the moment. So nice work on that. If any clients are watching this or companies are watching this and they're interested to find out a little bit more about, what's the best way to reach out to you? Just directly through your website or LinkedIn? What's the best form?
Yeah. LinkedIn is definitely the main channel. We do a lot of, we share a lot of our insights through there. There's no shortage of generative AI insights, but we are going to be releasing a newsletter in the very near future. So that'll be another way to stay in touch with what we're doing.
Perfect, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I've learned a lot, so I'm sure that everyone watching will have as well. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, mate.